Something that might not seem particularly connected to mindfulness, apart from next door's dogs barking, is football and the idea of supporting a football team. But what I wanted to talk about today and explore a little bit was how the way that we become, or people become obsessed with a particular team's fortunes and supporting a particular team and make that a part of their identity, how that actually happens and how that relates to our mindfulness practice. So I want to start by disclosing for anyone in Australia, especially Victoria, that I'm a supporter of the Collingwood Football Club. So I know some of you will be turning off already, but if you can stick through it, I'm not actually a bad guy. For anyone outside Victoria or Australia, Collingwood is one of those clubs that everyone loves to hate, which every league in the world probably has that club that's either more successful or just somehow gets a reputation that everyone else wants them to lose. And that becomes a part of the identity of the fans for supporting that club. And often those clubs have the most supporters, or Collingwood certainly has a lot of supporters in Victoria. And part of that is our thinking mind, so that part of us that analyses, that creates this idea that there's a separate me, there's a separate self that's living this separate life. That thinking mind is interested in difference, so it wants to be better than other people, and wants to feel superior than other people. So when we're young, if we're in a sporting culture, often we're drawn to or maybe forced to pick a particular team to support. And supporting that team actually becomes almost a part of the thinking mind's identity. So when that team's going really well, then we feel kind of superior to people who support other teams. And when that team's going badly, then we just try not to talk about it. Change the subject, or talk about how our team was better last year or 5 years ago. So the thinking mind becomes obsessed with the team's success. And if we're identified with our thinking mind, which means if we're lost in thought, if we're not mindful, we're not watching those thoughts come and go, then we can start to believe that it's actually important how my team goes. It actually matters on a kind of universal level. When in reality, we know that, there's every chance that you could have picked a different team when you were young, and you'd be obsessed with how that team goes. The more identified people are with their mind, and the bigger a part of that identity that team is, the bigger the high they get when that team wins, and the bigger the low they get when that team loses. So if you watch football fans in Victoria before a game, most people are a bit nervous, a bit tense, a bit anxious, because they're basically there in part to watch the game, but in part because they're wanting a particular outcome. They're wanting their team to kick the ball through the goals more times than the opposition team. And that's often more important to people than the actual quality of the game even. They'd rather watch a game that's pretty average but where their team wins by a lot than to watch their team get beaten in a game that's really high quality. So in mindfulness, what we're trying to do is tune into what's happening here and now and pay more attention to the actual action as it's happening than to the result. Because we naturally tend to do the same thing in our outside life when we're obsessed with or identified with the thinking mind. So we pay more attention to the result of our actions, of our job, of what we do day to day, than actually enjoying each moment, enjoying things as they're happening. So we do things to try and get a particular result, and if that result happens, then we're temporarily happy until the mind comes up with something else that it wants. And if those results don't happen, then we feel unhappy, frustrated, angry. We might spend time dwelling on why it should have happened that way, what I should have done differently, what someone else should have done differently. So we get sucked into thinking about the past, thinking about the future, and missing what's happening now. And 95% of sports commentary, sports media is about the past and the future. So if you read articles about football, it'll be all about how the team's going and what that means for whether they can win this season or whether they're going to make the finals or whatever. So if we get focused on the outcomes, then we can't enjoy the actual process as much. We can't enjoy watching the game as much. So it's often, some people say, well, I actually like watching a game where I don't go for either team. And I think the reason is you can actually just watch the spectacle, watch the game, enjoy the atmosphere without being caught up in, obsessed with a particular result. So we don't have to get frustrated if one team scores or the other team doesn't score. We can just enjoy each event that happens. When we practice mindfulness, we can do this with our everyday life, and we can do this with sport, even if we do barrack for one particular team. So as I say, I'm a Collingwood supporter, and before I started practicing meditation, practicing mindfulness, I would get absolutely furious if my team didn't win. I'd be yelling and screaming at the TV, I'd be carrying on, and if they did win, I'd be yelling and screaming and carrying on too. And during that time, by the way, Collingwood never did that well. Since I started practicing mindfulness, I've stopped watching much football for one thing, but when I do watch it, I can actually just enjoy it, and I'm not too fussed whether my team scores or the other team scores, or whether my team's even playing. I can just watch the spectacle, and then after a while I get bored and turn off and do something else. But there's no sense of obsession, and I don't actually feel like that club is a part of me, is a part of who I am. It's kind of a part of the identity that I talk about when people say, who do you go for? And particularly where I live, people get stuck into you for barracking for that particular football team. But for me, it's not really a part of who I am. It's kind of a part of who I used to be, and I still follow that team because it's a bit of fun. But if they lose every game this season, I really wouldn't care. And I could still watch them getting absolutely thrashed and just enjoy the spectacle. And since I've been practicing mindfulness, it's the same in my everyday life, that mostly, however it turns out, I can just enjoy the process and do my best and see those little hiccups that happen as just a bit of a challenge or something different. So I always like to put a little exercise in these videos, so let's do a little something. We'll just do a little bit of listening. And if you are a sports fan, try this next time you're at a game. Just stop for a minute during the game and just listen and see if you can listen and watch your thoughts. So be separate from your thoughts in a way. Be observing them. So you can do that by just listening and just noticing every sound that you can hear around you right now. So my mind would say that I can hear birds, I can hear the dog chewing on his bone, if you're wondering what that was. I can hear sounds from inside the house. But if I just listen to those sounds without commenting on them, it really brings me into the moment, just brings a real sense of peace. I can still watch the thoughts, watch the comments coming through from my mind, but I don't need to get caught up in them. So I'm going to say goodbye now, but when this video stops, just take a few moments wherever you are to just listen without judgment, without comment, and just notice what sounds you can hear around you. Bye.